Hi, welcome back to the workshop for part 7 of the Micawber Telecaster build, and in this episode we're going to continue with the neck by making the fretboard. Okay, so I've got this fretboard blank as supplied by the customer. It's already thicknessed, so it's down to thickness, ready to go really. And as always, the first stage in this is to get a centre line onto both sides of the fretboard and onto the ends, just so we know where we're working from. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to measure it with my calipers. At each end, half that distance. Okay, so that's the centre line in. Now, this doesn't have to be actually centred to the board. If you've got some nice figure in the board that you want to keep in and don't want trimming off, or there's figure in the board that would look better centred on the neck of the guitar, that's not a problem. You can do it off centre as long as you just work to that centre line that you draw on, and there's enough material in the blank to trim off once you get it onto the neck. Now, looking at this, it's a fairly blank board, so there's nothing that I need to kind of make sure I'm getting in any particular place. So I'm thinking I'm going to put my nut line just about there. And then I'm just going to mark that square across the board with the protractor. Okay, so with that marked on, the first thing I'm going to do is get this attached to the template and put the fret slots in. Some people do it the other way around, they'll radius first, but I like to do it like this. So I've got my fret template. So this is the 25.5 and 25-inch scale lengths. I'm going to be using 25.5. And I'm just going to super glue and masking tape the two together. So to position this, I basically just need to put it in a position where down the thick end of the fretboard here, it's not obstructing the little notches that work in the jig. And then I'll mark where the centre line is. Measure that to the edge of the template, which is 26mm, and then put another mark up this end. And then draw that line in. Now, doing these fender style necks are quite tricky because the fretboard actually extends beyond the length of the template, so we need a way of making sure that we've got that aligned properly. So all I'm going to do is going to put another little piece of masking tape on the back temporarily, and then I'm just going to mark on my centre line so that I can clamp everything together, and then I can just put a reference mark on there for when I glue it all together. And this could be relatively tricky to do. And that's spot on. So the next trick is to get my fret slotting jig into the vise and I can get cutting. Okay, so if you haven't seen this fret slotting jig before, there's a little pin in here. And what you do is you put your template in, and there's a little notch in the template that locates against the pin. You make sure that you're holding the template flush against the side of the jig, and then just cut your slot, move up to the next slot, cut again, and just repeat right the way down the board. Okay, so there's the fret slots done. All look very nice. The use of those templates and the slotting jig really does make it an easy job. Right, anyway, onto the radiusing. Now the customer likes his Les Pauls, so he's decided to go with a 12-inch radius on this board. I know that's not going to be universally popular, but it's his decision at the end of the day. For what it's worth, the last telly that I made, the thin line, that also had a 12-inch radius, and I quite like it actually. So I don't think it's a bad decision. It's just a different choice to what people would normally make. Now this board is quite straight grained, and I did clean it up a little bit with a plane before I slotted it, so I know that it's not going to tear out. It's not got any kind of crazy figure in it. So I'm going to take this to the bench now, and I'm going to take a block plane to it and just take the edges off the board just to make that sanding in process a little bit quicker. Okay, so that's relatively close now. Taken most of the waste off. The good thing about having these fret slots if you're planing is it kind of automatically breaks the grain, so it reduces the risk of tear out, which is a really good thing. Okay, so that's the board radius now. I'm very happy with the way it's come out, but what I've actually managed to do is sand out quite a lot of the fret slots that I put in. So the next step is to take the fret slotting saw with its guide on and just open those out again. Okay, so with that done, I've just marked up the centre line again, and I've just marked out where it is that I'm going to want my position markers. So now all I'm going to do is just find the centre of each position that needs a marker, just by putting the diagonals in. Okay, so there's the dot markers fitted. Quite like that, looks quite nice. So the next thing I'm going to do is just get this fitted onto the neck so we can get it rough trimmed and then get it glued on. So to position this onto the neck, there's 3 alignment points really. There's the centre line at the heel, there's a centre line at the headstock, and there's the position of the nut. Now I've marked all 3 onto the neck and all 3 are marked onto the fretboard. So it's really just a matter of lining them all up . And just temporarily clamping it into position. And the way I approach this is I'm going to put a hole which is 2mm, but I'm just going to drill through the fretboard in the first fret slot. I'm going to go through the fretboard and a little bit into the neck, but not too far because you don't want to go through. And then I'm going to take a little bit of cocktail stick and just pin the fretboard on with it. And then I'm going to do the same down the other end of the neck, but at a diagonal. And that is our fretboard positioned, and I can see it's absolutely spot on where it needs to be. Now that might seem like a bit of a drastic move, drilling holes through the fret slot, but I've drilled a 2mm hole and the frets that I'm using are wider than that. So once I've trimmed this off and re-established the fret slot and put the fret in, you will never know that they've been there. Okay, so with that done, I can now mark with confidence where I need to trim down the fretboard. So I can take that off, leaving the pins in the neck. I'm going to take this to the bandsaw off camera and just rough trim it to shape. Okay, with that done, nothing left for it now but to get a bit of masking tape over the truss rod, so we're not going to fill that up with glue. I think this is particularly important in this C-section rod because there's quite a lot of surface area on the rod to get glue up against, and because you're having to move like 10mm of flat surface on both sides to get an adjustment on the rod, I think there's a lot of scope for that to bind up if we were to get excess glue in there. So I'm going to cover that up with a little thin strip of masking tape and then just glue it on. And there we are, all glued up. I'm just having a look down the sides and it seems to have gone down really evenly. Nice squeeze out all along, so that's happy days on that one. So I'm going to leave this in the clamps overnight and we'll have a look at it tomorrow. Okay, so I think we've made some major progress on the build tonight. So I'm going to leave this episode here, but I'll be back very shortly when we'll get it out of the clamps, get it cleaned up and start to look to get some frets into the neck. I hope you've enjoyed this episode and found it useful. If so, like and subscribe, all the usual stuff, and I'll look forward to seeing you very, very soon. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.